Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's community call for August 13th. Today, the topic is managing risks at retreat centers. I'm Erin McAuley. I'm the RCC admin assistant. I welcome any pronouns. And just to get us started, I'm going to share our RCC values and community agreements. Just to give you an introduction if you're not familiar with RCC so that you know a little bit about what we're about and how we like to hold space for each other. I'll take a moment and I'll share. You might be able to see now, we've got our core values up on the screen here. I'll share these in brief right now and then also provide a link that gives a little bit more detail, but core values of RCC were founded in the power of place and space. So the idea that retreat centers create spaces that are outside the normal flow of every day-to-day life. And those spaces are really important for number two, our second core value, the interplay of inner and outer work. So that creating these spaces outside the normal flow of day-to-day life gives us an opportunity to work on ourselves, to transform ourselves for the better. And also transforming ourselves for the better helps us transform the world. And when we're talking about transforming the world, this is our third core value, the commitment to universal flourishing. So we're hoping that the work that we do on ourselves, on the world, or in the world, we're hoping that that is work that will benefit the transformation of society, human life, but not just human life. We want the transformations to be beneficial for the animal world, the plants, the animals, the planet, more than human life. If you want to think about divinity, all the way down to like a little ant, we would like our work to be meaningful for all of creation. And when we talk about coming into group together, these are our community agreements. We ask that you speak from your own experience. So we're really interested in hearing your stories. We're interested in hearing what your personal experience is. So please talk from what you know and what you've lived. Your voice and your story are important to us. As Justine may know, I believe this quotation comes from Justine. We are all knowers and learners in this space. So we all have the opportunity to learn from each other and to share what we know with each other, and that we ask that you keep yourself open to deep listening as well as to share what you know so that we can learn from each other. Silence can be centering, and movement and sound can be centering too. So we may engage in practices that call us to be very quiet to bring us back to center, or we may ask that you move around, and that may be a way of centering as well. But these are all invitational requests, so participate as you feel comfortable and able. We also ask that you keep others' stories confidential to share what you learned. So in this instance, especially when we might be talking about legal matters, we're asking that you actually not speak about any ongoing legal proceedings that might be going on in your life. Those should be kept confidential. And also, if someone shares a really personal story, for one, if you would like me to stop the recording, just give me a sign, send me a message, let me know that you would like the recording paused, and I'll pause that. And also, when you're talking about what you learn on these calls, take a moment to reflect and to distill what you've learned, but to maybe take out names to make sure that you're not sharing something vulnerable that people would not want to be shared. Also, this is an invitational space, and to participate as you are able. So what that means is we want to make room for people to be human beings on these calls. Well, you may need to get up and stretch, you may need to take a drink, you may need to hop off for a little bit. We know that retreat center leaders are constantly having asks made of you, people calling, needing help. So if you need to hop off a call, if you need to come on late, please just, come if you can, or watch later if that works better for you. We also ask that you hold discomfort with grace and deep listening. So some of the topics that we talk about may be very difficult. They may be really hard. So enter those moments of discomfort with wanting to really be present in the moment. And again, that deep listening. We're not here to fix each other. We're here to companion each other and learn from each other. And as always, one of our favorite quotations is, choice is the smallest unit of liberation. So we like to offer as many choices as we can. If you have ideas for how we can offer more choices for how you can participate, please reach out and let us know. And that's from Dr. Leticia Nieto. And I'm going to share in chat a couple of links here to our core values and community agreements, as well as to our green paper. So if you would like to learn more about RCC, you can do that. I just have to get my mouse going. There you go. So it's been about a month. We've had a break because July's the busy season for retreat centers, was also a very busy month for RCC. And let's take a little moment to get into the space together. And I'd like to do that by actually inviting you to my morning this morning. I'm at the Sienna Retreat Center in Racine, Wisconsin. The Midwest region group is here on retreat together. So they're meeting with each other to discuss all things retreat and figure out how they can collaborate and coordinate working together in the future. And they're having a really good time, which has been a lot of fun. So, and the land here is beautiful. We've got Lake Michigan just a few steps away. And I'm going to share a picture of my morning this morning and invite us all to take just a little moment to center and enjoy the view. If my mouse will cooperate. Hold, please. Well, my technology gives me a slight challenge here. There it is. Okay. Can you guys see that on your end? So this is my view this morning. This is at the Racine, in Racine, Wisconsin, at the Sienna Retreat Center. They've got this beautiful rocky beach. So I'd like you to sort of settle in your seat, take a moment to take a deep breath and relax. And imagine what it might like to be out there. For me, I climbed out on the rocks to the very end of that point and sat and listened to the waves. And if you want, I invite you to take a moment to imagine yourself sitting out on those rocks or standing at the waves, watching the sunlight over the water. Let's take just a deep breath in. You're welcome to close your eyes if you want to. Deep breath in, and then a slow breath out. Another big deep breath in, and a slow breath out. Another big deep breath in, Slow breath out. And set the pace of your own breathing. And as you breathe in and out, let it have a rhythm like waves. And as the waves wash out, as you breathe out, you're letting go of any tension you might be holding. And you're settling yourself into the space. Imagining yourself at the water's edge here, let's bring in a sense of what else you might be experiencing while you stand on the shore. Imagine what the temperature of the air feels like. Is there wind, the sound of the water? Are you touching the water at all? And what does that feel like? What might you hear? Are there birds calling? The sound of the waves? Is there anyone else here? Do you hear other voices, or is it just you standing in quiet solitude? Let yourself really sink into the experience of being in this space and the beauty of the surrounding nature. You can sense any last tension that you might be holding. Breathe it out. Give it to the elements. Let them hold you. And then offer a very gentle thank you to the water of Lake Michigan, to the air, to the earth, the sand. Give those elements thanks. And then take a big deep breath in, come back. You're invited to roll your shoulders. If you're holding any last tension you want to get rid of, you can shake it out. Stretch your neck. Breathe out and welcome back. And let's talk a little bit. Well, we might do, Eve, do you feel like you'd like to do some introductions or, okay. So we're going to invite you to do introductions. If you'd like to, you're invited to either come off mute and let us know who you are, what retreat center you're affiliated with. Did you see anything beautiful in nature today that you'd like to share? Let us know. Or if you would prefer to talk with us in the comments, you can give an introduction in the chat box as well. Feel free to hop in.
Hi, I'm Gloria Alt, and I'm the president of the board of directors of the Sienna Retreat Center. So I'm glad that you're having a wonderful time. I wish you could all be there. It's a very, very special place. And I also attended 2 years spiritual guidance training program at Sienna. So as many times as I've seen shots of the beach and shots of the rocks, there's something new and wonderful about every time I look at that, and I'm just filled with gratitude for the legacy that has allowed so many people to go to the retreat center and have those experiences. And I know you all feel that way about your retreat centers. So I just wanted to say hi, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah,
Not
thank
as
you.
not as an executive director, but as as a board president.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you.
I'll introduce myself. I'm Kirsten Vander Giesen Reitzma. I am at Gilchrist Retreat Center in Southwest Michigan. in Three Rivers, and also I'm on the RCC Stewardship Circle. And I think right now the thing that I'm appreciating about nature the most is our 50-some degree nights. COVID has finally hit our household, but so far I and my son are fine, and that is probably largely due to just being able to have all the windows open all the time in this beautiful, comparatively very mild August for Michigan. So I'm very thankful for that.
Thank you, Kirsten. Hi, Justine. We see you in the chat. I'm glad you're here.
I'm Susan Clausen. I'm the director of one of the 2 retreat centers at the Loretto Mother House in Central Kentucky. And a little blue salamander just crossed my path and reminded me of all the little beings upon which all life depends, and which I take for granted and sometimes allow to frighten me. So just a good reminder.
Thank you. I love that. Little blue salamander.
My name is Marisa. I am at Well of Mercy. We're just north of Charlotte. One of the things that I'm most thankful for is the rain. I know some people are tired of the rain, but our retreat center was looking really crispy probably about 3 weeks ago. And now the rain has come and everything is looking lush and beautiful. And yeah, so that's good.
That's wonderful. I love the rain too, so I'm right there with you. Oh, and it looks like Cheryl from Richmond, Virginia is enjoying the crepe myrtle tree outside the window. I'm glad you could join us for a little bit, Cheryl. There will be a recording later if you want to follow up on the rest of the call.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you.
My name is Todd. I manage the operations and the property at Our Lady of the Prairie Retreat in Wheatland, and I'm at home today. And our joy is coming in the form of a 4-year-old grandson. My wife and I are doing Nana and Papa duty today, so that's why I'm coming to you from my phone today. So yeah, I'm happy to be here, and thank you for letting me tune in.
Great to have you here, Todd. Thank you. And it looks like we also have Rebecca Mickler joining us, ED at Villa Maria Education and Spirituality Center. Glad to have you here, Rebecca.
I'm Betty Shoemaker from Cottonwood, Idaho for the Spirit Center Retreat Center here. And as I look out the window, they are harvesting. And so it's just wonderful to see all these wheat fields and to hear the machinery going. So it's great to know that they can harvest because we've had a little bit of rain and we've had a little bit of hail. So grateful that they can get out in the fields.
Great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Lynn, and I'm in Chester, Connecticut at the Guest House Retreat and Conference Center. And we have a beautiful sugar maple tree that grows out of the middle of a very large wooden deck that we have. We have a 3-tiered deck that overlooks a pond, and this tree, was already there. So we just built the deck around it. And I was just sitting outside. It's only about 80 degrees here and not humid today, which is unusual for us in August. And just enjoying the shade of that tree, it's about 150 years old. So it's a tree that a lot of people get very connected to when they come here. So it's just gorgeous.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Sarah Lynn. That's a wonderful image. Would anyone else like an opportunity to introduce themselves? Not, I'll turn things over to, it looks like Trevania just said hello. board president at Dharmakaya Center in Craigsmore, New York. Looks like their son lives in Europe, and I'm excited he's coming home to visit Friday. That's great, Tavania. Thank you for sharing. Okay. All right. Well, Eve, would you like to introduce yourself and get things
Be
started?
happy to. Thank you so much, Erin. And hello, friends. I'm Eve Wachhaus. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Adamah. Adamah is America's largest faith-based environmental organization. And we have 2 retreat centers, one in Maryland called Pearlstone, and one in Connecticut called Isabella Friedman. And as COO, I oversee operations at both. And it's a pleasure to be with you all today. Some of you I have been with now, it's going on 5 years. So hello to my friends Kirsten and Justine. It's been a long, long time since we were together in person, but boy, have we weathered a lot of battles. And I have been involved with the RCC in various ways, and I'm delighted that I get to be here today to see if there is a way as a community we can talk about risk and what does that mean in your own organizations, in your own present moment, and what are some of the preparedness tactics we could be taking that make sense, while holding space for the fact that risk will feel very different at different times for each of us in our own retreat centers, in our roles, and in the decisions we make about how we are serving community in our own spaces. And we will make different choices. So I want to start off by welcoming differences of opinions, because we will have different priorities in terms of risk, although I'll be focusing on just a few of those areas today. So with that, we're going to get started with a PowerPoint that I hope is not just me speaking one way. Please, please do be a part of this, and let's make it interactive. All right, so when we talk about risk itself, there are so many different types of risks that some of us are facing. They can be risks in terms of the paperwork we are using to contractually obligate people to have events or retreat with us. It could be risks about the protocols and safety of our campuses, our facilities, our buildings, our utilities themselves. Risk could be about people who work with us, people who come onto our land, going through a pandemic, inherent risks associated with any activities they might be doing in our spaces for their own safety and for ours. Or it could be the kinds of procedures and certifications we hope to have in place to mitigate risk when we are dealing with tools, equipment, food, and chemicals. So we have some really, really big buckets here of where risk could fall. Before I move on, I'm happy to say that there may be more bullets. There may be other big, huge buckets of categories of risk. Are there any that are not falling to mind in one of these buckets that you want to raise up at this point? If so, drop it into the chat. Happy to add more. And as we do that, we're going to move on to the next slide, where I hope a few of our heartbeats are going up a little bit. If this is an area you have in your purview, here are just some of the things that come to mind that I'm managing in terms of risk. Are all of my buildings up to code, and my health inspectors and my fire marshals going through them? What about mitigating risks with all these storms we're facing in the country and worrying about trees coming down? What are our emergency preparedness plans? Are we worried about liability when employees are no longer working with us? And as you can see, many, many, many others. If you have risks that are coming to mind and you want to get off mute now and shout them out into the ether of this ACK moment, I welcome that. And if there are any here that are not familiar to you and you want to go, press pause, Eve, what are you talking about? What's serve safe or what's a crowd control plan? I don't know what these things are. I'm more than happy to explain to anyone. Is there anyone here that speaks a different language at your retreat center and these are not commonly used terms?
I'd also like to just hop in here real quick, Eve, and let people know that we'll make the slideshow available to you as well afterwards. So if you're fervently taking notes, you don't have to worry about that.
But yeah, anybody have any other either questions about these or ones they want to bring up now? If not, we will move on to just a couple in the contractual side of it and what contract risk is, but I'm more than happy to jump in any of the others.
Maybe I would just add as kind of a overarching risk is the risk of climate change, and under climate change, ticks, emergency preparedness, tree trimming. But that's just kind of the vocabulary that I use or what I feel when I think about the risk of the retreat center.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Adamah believes it is the greatest existential threat to mankind right now, and that we as a Jewish organization have an obligation to have a Jewish response. So I feel very strongly about the climate crisis we are in and how our retreat centers can be places to activate learning and spark and encourage some action to be taken. So thank you for that. All right. I want to also mention as we talk about risk that I think at least there is a tension between all of the pieces we want to do in mitigating risk, but also in holding up what we think of the heart of people on retreat in our spaces and what retreating means to us. And that for some people, the volume of lengthy legalese in documents could be antithetical or problematic when one is supposed to be creating a loving, welcoming, and owned space by many different populations. So I really want to lift that up. And if you have some general examples where you think, I want people on zip lines, but I don't want them to fill out waivers first because that ruins the fun, kills the vibe. This is a great moment to bring some of those up.
I can share an example. As a retreat center that's part of a larger organization, there can be some tension sometimes between sort of industry standard or things that get handed down from our insurance company in tension with the culture of retreat centers. So this was several years ago when our somebody from our finance office decided that we needed to like vet people at the entrance and have them show their IDs and take their license plate number before they could come on campus. And we said we feel really weird about that. And they were gracious enough to, to let us check with our other neighborhood retreat centers and just see what other centers do. They were open to the observation that it was not really part of the culture, at least for our local retreat centers here, to do that kind of gatekeeping. So I was thankful for that, but that was one example for us.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, that first welcoming 15 feet when you come onto campus being under scrutiny and needing to show identification for sure. A great example. Are there any others? If not, we can keep going.
I'd like to lift up the complex situation of an all-age retreat center versus a retreat center that would have adults presumed healthy. Our retreat center does not allow children under 18, which I don't have a problem with based on the kind of programming that we give, but does that also include like not a nursing infant? And if we're also on a campus where there is assisted living for vowed religious and a healthcare a nursing home, there's older people and getting our vendors to understand that their safety has to be paramount, and their visitors' safety. So it's complex,
For
the age
sure.
thing.
Yeah, and interesting that there is a age requirement to come onto your space and what that helps with programming, but what does that then mean by extension? So thank you for raising that up, Gloria. Sarah Lynn, you also wanted to add something?
Yes, I wanted to say similar to Gloria about age. So we do allow children, but we have the parent or guardian sign a waiver so that they're really aware that we don't have many children here. We're not childproof, and that they're responsible, to keep an eye on them and everything. And it's one of the few things that, seems to come up from time to time that bothers, some of the staff. It's not that they don't want children here, it's that they don't necessarily feel they can be safe. And it's less about our environment than it is about parents' seeming inability to keep an eye on them. I think that, retreat centers can draw a certain type of people who do tend to be passive. So we see like a lot of passive parenting, which, can be good and bad depending on the environment that you're in. And so that concerns our staff. So I would definitely put that out there about age of people, and then also, includes on the other end of the spectrum when we do have older people or differently abled people come, and it's we're just not fully ADA compliant. We're this, many retreat centers, right? We're just, we're an old country inn that has not been retrofitted in any way. And so we don't have all of our spaces accessible. So that can be concerning.
Beautiful. That's really helpful. I'm hearing some interesting themes from both what you said and Gloria said that I want to raise up. One of them is about mitigating slips and falls with people who may have mobility issues, and whether our retreat center's programming space and ADA accessibilities are in conflict with all peoples having a safe experience. And that's different from saying we might have programming in which the content or the meditative style is silent, in which having 47 third graders on a kids programming retreat simultaneously might not be a good fit. So I'm hearing some of both of those, and that's really interesting and certainly true in some of our experience. Giovanni, do you want to jump in too?
Well, I was just going to say that we've had that same conflict in terms of children. We used to be open to all children. We had some bad experiences with parents who were not, even though we had explained that that's your responsibility, maybe their view of appropriate behavior for their children is not the same as, I don't personally think it's appropriate for a child to bounce a ball off of another retreatant's head while everyone's trying to sit and listen to the teacher. And then it was capped by somebody bringing an infant to a silent retreat, which was also a little bit of a mismatch. So we do now we still allow children under 12 with a parent, but not children under 12. Because we've had those experiences. And people don't always find that welcoming, but we try to think of, the larger group.
Well, and I have a friend who says clarity is kindness. So it's like
there you go.
Work for you.
But we do sometimes have day programs that are child specific. So there's an opportunity to welcome children in of a younger age, because for those we're tuned and we have the staffing ready to focus. It's not an adult program that a bored child is sitting at. It's a program that's designed for children. So that's how we've been able to manage that balance. Whether that's helpful for anyone else.
Very. Thank you so much for sharing that as well. So let's go into one section of risk, although I'm really open to talk about others as well. In contracts, many of us in retreat centers have hold harmless and indemnification language in which we're setting up expectations in their signing of their contract, not just for how many people and how many meals and how many days and if there's any educational programs, but that they are signing a contractual agreement in which they are releasing us as the retreat center from liability or damages or losses while they are with us. And interestingly, for some of us in the retreat center community, we only have individuals who sign up for programs that we run, which means that individuals are signing their name to hold harmless. Others of us have rentals throughout the year in which we're not the people running the retreat. An outside organization is using our space as its venue, in which case this is signed by the group leader on behalf of the organization and not the individuals. So I want to just check in here and talk a little bit more about hold harmless clauses. And I'm going to go into more language about indemnification and reciprocity as well. But hold harmlesses are trying, in the case of litigation after an experience at our retreat centers, for us to be able to show that they have already signed, that they have agreed to hold us harmless. Sarah Lynn, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that our center almost exclusively rents to other groups. So our founders have their own programs, but they're in their own retreat community. So we don't do programs, so to speak. So so we're renting to everyone. And we used to, as you said, just have people, the group leader would sign for everyone. Not your best choice. So what we do now is we have an online check-in so we send an email out to all the participants that have signed up for a retreat. And we have to get, of course, those emails from the group leader because they don't register individually with us. They register with the group. And but we don't have any problem. They give us the emails. So we send that out. And part of that is the hold harmless agreement. So when they're checking in, there's a few things that they're going to click on and agree to. And we have found that it's quick, it's easy. We get far less pushback than trying to give everyone who's checking in an individual piece of paper to sign before we give them their key. And so if anybody, is having thoughts about making sure every individual does it, that might be something helpful for them.
Thank you. Do you use Retreat Guru for that, or do you use a different registration software for retreat centers?
We use our own. Yeah, we
okay.
Proprietary software. Yes. Yeah.
Great. For many folks in the RCC community, if you are doing individuals signing up with a registration system, they use Retreat Guru, which allows you to also put that in and customize your registration pages so that they could hold harmless. So for those of you in this Zoom call who do not use it, that may be something to look into. Okay, we're going to go on into indemnifications then. Indemnification in the contracts are really trying to shift risk. And it is explicit in that not only will your retreat center be held harmless if there is something that happens, but there may be language about who needs to pay for or compensate for losses that occur. And it typically is about third-party claims. So I don't know if many of you have a whole system in your first aid practices at your retreat centers where you have forms like insurance incident reports, both for your staff or for your guests, different from workers' compensation claims. But this would be a place where if people have already signed off on indemnification and hold harmless, if they need to have some level of first aid, AED, CPR done while there is an incident, you will have already had that signed. So there are many pieces to indemnification. And if we go on to the next part, I think I can show us an example. So here is a contract sample language that I thought I would share. In general contracts, this is what indemnification and hold harmless language looks like when it is just saying that your group is going to hold our location harmless. Costs for damages incurred to property, we can bill to you. You are responsible and reimburse us for any damage done by your client, your guests, or your contractors. And it lists a number of people who, if they were negligent and caused damage, would be indemnified. Now that's what sample language looks like. However, this is completely in the retreat center's favor. And there will be times when your contracts might be with an organization that is your municipalities, your state, the federal government, a much larger national corporation, in which their legal review of any contracts require mutual indemnification, which they say we won't go into having a retreat at your place unless we both agree to hold each other harmless. So the next one is what that looks like. Here's a mutual indemnification. Each party indemnifies, defends, and holds harmless the other party and all the other people that are related with it. All of the expenses, with a whole long list of what those expenses could be, or actions, what those actions could be under an agreement. And then it usually specifies according to which terms that might supersede this, like the state you're in, for example. So if you're working with universities, public schools, larger corporations, they may need to have a mutual indemnification clause or addendum put in. Is there anybody in the call for whom I am now speaking gibberish and wants me to stop for a second and explain what's going on? Because we all come from very different paths to get here. Okay, great. We can keep going then. That all of that is contract language. That's separate from what could be in a waiver. Waivers are typically individuals or individuals on behalf of those who don't have capacity to sign their own waivers, voluntarily surrendering a right or a privilege. Easiest one is you're going down my zip line and no, I'd really want to make sure you sign this first because there is inherent risk to physical harm associated with this activity. And even though we've put harnesses on and helmets on and we have certified instructors at either end of the zip line, we still want to make sure you sign one of these before you go on it. So that's an example of a waiver. I heard already in this call, people mentioned waivers when they have activities, but I know sometimes there are reasons why it's complicated. At a Jewish retreat center, for example, people do not write on the Sabbath and on some holidays. So when we're hosting holiday retreats, we have waivers that are electronic prior to arrival, and we have an iPad out at registration to catch anybody else who might change their mind and suddenly want to do an activity to be able to sign a waiver before the sun sets, so we can get those in place. You have any activities at your retreat center for which you have a waiver? Hang gliding, boating, scuba diving. Erin, what did you and I figure out a week ago? There was a dolphin.
Oh, yeah, dolphin encounters.
Dolphin encounters. There's a lot of different waivers. We have high ropes courses. We have night hikes blindfolded. People have sweat lodges. Those are all times in which you might want to have waivers because there's going to be a physical activity. Yeah, Travania.
Well, what's to me ironic is that we found we probably should have one before yoga programs because we had a woman dislocate her shoulder trying to do a move.
Thank you. Yeah.
But we do actually ask our instructors to take care of that.
Great. A good point. Okay, well then I think maybe it's time for us to open up a discussion. So we can go to the next slide and talk about anything similar in your agreements, your contracts, your waivers, where you're thinking, oh, we are going to we're going to be eating insects and we'd like everybody to sign a waiver so we can mitigate any allergic reactions, or we're considering an expansion to our campus, and this is something we want to do in our capital projects, but we're really worried about the implications for contracts or something like that. Does that spark anybody's thoughts about agreements, contracts, or waivers?
I guess I'd like to ask, because our retreat center is disaffiliating from governance by the Sisters of St. Dominic. And this is all new to us as far as setting up these agreements and contracts and waivers. This is maybe a terrible thing to ask, but if you could give me one piece of advice for a board of directors who is taking a look for the first time at agreements that are already set up, what would you suggest we look for? That would be my first question. And my second question is, a lot of our contracts are actually contracts. They're not. They're memos of understanding, because we're in this umbrella group. And some of us feel strongly that all of our memos of understanding should be negotiated to enforceable contracts.
I'm happy to respond, but is there anyone else here who wants to shed some wisdom on what they would recommend first? Okay, then Gloria, I would certainly say the most important thing as you are in a moment of transition is to find a pro bono lawyer. And rather than everybody be on a learning curve for what are the requirements against your insurance companies, your directors and officers, your contracts within your state, that you have somebody who is willing to volunteer their expertise to be able to navigate that with you and hold your hand through it.
Okay.
Because there are significant differences between contracts and memorandums of understanding. And so I want to make sure that in your area for your purposes, you are getting the expertise that you need, rather than offering an armchair support from here in Maryland today. But I can tell you, in our experience, having pro bono attorneys has been really important, because not only do contracts go through revisions and revising, but contract law changes,
Sure.
to be aware of those changes. And we also continue to try and do different things within our 2 retreat centers that require different kinds of language. So that would be my strong recommendation, that you get someone to be able to help be by your side.
Okay. Well, that's interesting, because I am a lawyer, but not in contracts. And we have another lawyer on the board, but not in contracts. And it's,
and if it's a large enough firm, and you may be in one of those firms or run it yourself, where there are specialists, but also, depending on the size of the organizations, having employment also be an area of specialty, can really help if you are ever concerned about severance or any other protections for staff when they're no longer with you. So just some things to consider depending on the
Okay,
size of organization.
thank you. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Yep, let's go on. So another thing that is useful in the language about risk is when rentals use your space, they should have their own insurance. And if it's a wedding or a 3,000 person camper campus rental or a barbecue with the Boy Scouts, they may not have an entity that is coming that day with a certificate of insurance. And so our retreat centers have recommendations of where they can go get those and specific language in a sample COI of what it needs to have as limits of what insurance that they are going to get. But yes, when weddings have their ceremonies on our space, they need to also have a COI for that day, for those tents, for those vendors, for the activities on our campus, and something else that, as you mitigate risk, is worth looking at. So I just want to ask a couple questions about how do you manage risk? We were sharing a couple sample documents that Erin and I pulled together from my lived experience, but love to see others. And whether that risk is about contracting or whether that risk is all about people who supervise programs with kids and getting background checks, or whether that risk is all about the water features on your campus and aquatics and lifeguards. This is a time to have a quick discussion about it. So how does your center manage risk? Yeah, Todd.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? My
Right.
AC unit just kicked in. I don't know. Apparently I'm not supposed to talk today. I kind of feel like an organization could, protect themselves right out of business by is it really worth it? By having kids out here that you can't protect, or like in the kitchen. The kitchen is one of my concerns as far as we have a small kitchen. We are more like a bed and breakfasty than a big facility, and our kitchen is small, and our cooks are concerned sometimes about we're not kosher free or gluten free, and it's a we can't um, we can't guarantee things aren't. If someone has a horrible allergy, that's a concern of ours. And just along those lines, where do you exist without being you know just managing yourself right out of existence? Does that make any sense at all?
For sure, Todd. I bet you are not alone in this. We're doing the best we can, and maybe we can't mitigate the risk from what I think you're talking about, which is cross-contamination in the kitchen, when somebody might have a nut allergy or a gluten allergy and it's airborne, and the size of our kitchen and our facilities can't accommodate. And someone could have a really strong reaction while they're with us. I think that's reasonable. I wonder if there's folks here who think it's also okay to say, in the descriptions when people come to our place, we can't, unfortunately, we can't accommodate all dietary needs. Please let us know if you have one and we'll talk to you directly. Are there other folks who have concerns about foodborne allergies or about cross-contamination that they say we actually can't? Giovanni, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we say on our website, and we say it in the registration. We ask people options for dairy-free, vegan, gluten-free, and we are all vegetarian. And then there's a place where people can put comments. but we say in several places, basically, we do our best to accommodate, but we cannot promise that there won't be cross-contamination. We do
Is that enough?
also, on all our dishes, we have a card that says what all the ingredients are so that it's easy for people to choose things that hopefully they're not allergic to, but yeah. And so far we haven't had an issue, but we are very, very clear that we can't promise.
Todd,
So,
I have 33 years in hospitality, a lot of it in hotels, in which we would say all the time that we cannot accommodate all dietary needs.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I think setting those expectations prior to arrival is a lot safer for everybody than trying to figure out what to do on the fly, for sure. Nobody wants to get anybody hurt.
Yeah, I was just going to say, bringing it back to that clarity of communication, the clarity is kindness.
What other kind of risks do people have? It's really important to talk about some of these health and safety ones, but we still are in flu season, COVID. We are all managing that day in, day out. And there is an inherent risk that if our own team gets sick, it'll be hard for us to be able to serve the people who are coming. It's a real risk at retreat centers if we have a lot of people all out sick at the same time. Is that a risk for other people here on this call too? Are you managing health and safety of your guests and your staff around flu season, COVID, other disease control?
Well, I can jump in and I can say that a couple months ago we had COVID come through like a comet, and it put us in a position where we had to shut down, cancel a couple of events because probably 3 or 4 of our staff ended up getting it from a retreatant that came in. So yeah, and then a couple people that were in that group also got it. So I'll bet by the time it was done, 7 people had it. So
Yeah, that's the risk. There it is, Todd. Thank you for sharing that. I think that keeps some of us up at night, that if enough members of our team go down, we're going to have to cancel that. We're going to have to refund. People are going to be angry. I don't know if we can reschedule, or what if we get people sick when they're here? Do we have enough COVID rooms for people to be able to go and separate and before they can leave? It continues to plague many of our retreat centers, for sure. So thank you for raising that. That's a real concern. There's another major risk in retreat centers we should be real about. It is a fragile time in hospitality, and for some of us who are in the rental side of it or running our own retreats, we need to make sure that we are fiscally responsible and our retreat centers are secure. Not all of us have umbrella organizations that support our retreat centers. There's some real risk, and some of our friends have had quiet years as they regroup and figure out whether they can be retreat centers again. And so if that is heavy for any of you, I just want to name it. It's an ugly truth that financially many retreat centers are struggling. How about maintenance and deferred maintenance on your facilities? Do you feel like your utility systems, your aging buildings, your code, your roofs are all in good shape, or are people struggling with that kind of risk too? Sarah Lynn?
Fortunately, we're not struggling with that kind of risk anymore. But 10 years ago, when I came to Guest House, we really were. It was a huge liability for us. More often than not, we wouldn't have hot water for guests. Things like that were happening. And I would definitely encourage anybody who's in that situation to, prioritize that with owners or board of directors, because once that starts happening, you really lose momentum, for people wanting to come, and you lose that word of mouth. Right. Because, a presenter gets up in the morning and she's got a whole day ahead of her, and we don't have hot water and she can't wash her hair. It's like, it can be a disaster, and they can feel like, and rightly so, you're not fulfilling their obligations if they don't have basic things. And certainly any type of deferred maintenance that is creating a safety hazard. We had an issue where a former facility director had gotten some violations from the fire marshal. And he was so concerned about the budget that he didn't even give that information to the board of directors. He just hid it. And it wound up creating obviously more problems instead of less. So, it just has to be a priority. And if you're really not able to fully keep people safe, then you've got to rethink what you're going to do. It's not worth it. It's not worth it, so, but it can take a while if there's been a lot of deferred maintenance. Even when you get a commitment or you get funding, can be hard to turn that around. It snowballs, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
Please, Gloria.
What I've experienced at Sienna is some really outstanding planning by the executive director around, even depreciable items and things that she's got a really good sense, and the finance committee and the building and grounds committee have a really good sense of how long it's going to take for something to break, how long it's going to take for something to wear out or need to be replaced or refreshed or whatever. And it's really a lot of planning that has gone into that. And people who know what they're doing, walking around and looking at the building and saying, well, this has got to go on the 3 to 5 year list, and this has got to go on the 5 to 10 year list. And when the story was being told about the person who didn't tell the board, it just made me cringe, because the terrible truth is better than not having that knowledge. So I feel like what our center does is really good, and maybe even there are some suggestions from people that know better that can pass along to the rest of you what we do.
Thank you. There's a whole other kind of risk which has to do with safety, active shooter training, whether you have armed or unarmed security guards at the borders of your facility or throughout it, what your protocols are for an emergency. And so I just want to share that both of our retreat centers are Jewish identified spaces in the height of anti-Semitism in America right now, post October 7th. And that one of the things that we manage every day is staying on top of the National Register of the Secure Community Network, which is FBI, local enforcement, and Jewish organizations all reporting out incidents of harassment and threats, and whether those threats turn into action or not, that change day to day what our responses need to be. And like was mentioned at the beginning of this session, coming up and getting stopped by an armed guard and having to show your ID as a way to enter is a tough sell on the retreat experience that we're trying to have. But we also have a real threat right now in terms of keeping all of our staff and all of our guests safe throughout the country, wherever there are Jewish gatherings, because of the height right now of threats of violence. So that's my personal lived experience right now. And for each group, It requires different actions based on their commitments for the safety and security of their own staff and what level of threat we think we're at. And I just wonder, in your community, is there anything similar or some other kind of threat that's going on that has real impact for your retreat centers?
Eve, I'll chime in and say that we had a call about a year and a half ago that was about partnering with community organizations and change makers, activists. And I'll see if I can pop a link in the chat here to that call, but there was a panel on that call that was talking about creating space for change makers and activists requires some of those considerations about safety, because they might be on lists being watched. They might have safety concerns. Some of the people that come and really need retreat from those communities might be paranoid, but as they say, if they are out to get you, it's maybe you're not paranoid. So, those considerations of considering the practical reality that violence might happen to people at retreat centers, as much as we don't want that to happen. Something to keep in mind.
Great. Thank you for sharing that link. I think that will be useful as people consider in their own spaces what kinds of risks and threats are they considering. Are there anybody here who one of your risks is, I just can't hire people and I have too many open positions? Is anybody having a hard time filling staffing right now? That is a real risk and threat in some parts of the country.
We've had a problem with filling a couple of positions. And yeah, it is a struggle because we are not in a central location where we're near a bigger city. If you're in Charlotte or even Mooresville, you're looking at 45-minute plus drive each way, or even Winston-Salem. So it's really dependent on finding employees from the local area. In the local area, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That is true in many parts of the country right now with different retreat centers, certainly some of the ones I get to work in. The beauty of being remote is fabulous for the retreaters who come, but for those of us trying to operate, it sure is hard to make sure we have staffing at the capacity we want to be able to have the experience. So I feel you very strongly. And any of you who have surplus applicants, send them our way, please. Okay, then the next piece is about governance and committees and growing lay leaders. Anybody feel like you have risk to your retreat center in terms of all of the people that are pipelines to your board or serving on committees? Are you able to find people who have the time to volunteer in this way? It's such a meaningful and important part. And Gloria, I know, thank you for being one of those strong lay leaders for sure.
It's really hard with how retreat centers have been impacted and coming back from COVID, how it's no longer a resume builder. It's hard work. So you can't ask just anybody. And a lot of times when people hear what challenges are going on and what, the time commitment, it's more than just showing up at a meeting. So yeah, I don't have any answers to that. I have problems with that.
Awesome. Maybe more for Todd in my world than other people on this call, but one of the risks that is a reality right now is that all of our parts, equipment, construction materials, prices keep jumping over and over and over and over. And we thought 2 years post-pandemic, that was just a pandemic trucking and supply chain moment. But here we are continuing to get a quote. And if we don't act on it in 15 days, the price is just huge and jumping all the time and blowing our budgets. Is there anybody else who is facing this risk as you're trying to source materials and equipment? Todd, you're welcome to jump in. My hunch is this is you and me a lot of the time.
All I have to add to that is testify, sister. I hear you.
Thank you. So when we price out big projects, big capital improvement, and we get the approval of our board and we get our finances secured, by the time we then go back to those vendors, none of those numbers are real anymore. So it is a real one. Marissa, you were nodding along too?
Yeah, we have to build in, I've always learned to build in a contingency amount, maybe 10 to 15%. I know that sounds crazy, but it keeps us from having to go back and say we need more money. So if we don't spend it, we look great, but at least we have that approved in case we need to figure out if something is a little more expensive, then we can put that funds there and maybe try to mitigate some of the other costs. But yeah, it's a struggle.
Amazing. I feel it. So I've listed now several different whole worlds where risk can show up in these complex and dynamic systems that we are all managing in various ways. And I wonder if we can pivot just so that we end this conversation in the ways in which we feel like we really are managing risk or reducing the opportunities for terrible things to happen, and the care that is going into each one of these decisions to support our land, our retreat centers, and the people who are on our space. Does anybody have ones that they're using that they feel really good about?
I'd just like to lift up team building. When you have a situation where people are stretched very thin, if the employees and the staff feel like they're part of a team, that a lot of times some of these smaller things, it doesn't do a lot with the major issues, but some of the smaller things, there's a lot of collaboration around. I feel like our executive director has team building superpowers, and there's a lot of things that just don't fall through the cracks because the employees are so attuned to the mission, and she does a wonderful job at that.
Great. Thank you. That's beautiful. I'll lift up one while people are thinking of others. We have a small and mighty software system called FMX, which is just a work orders program. But we've really trained and empowered staff of many different departments at both retreat centers. When you see something, to be able to complete the work orders in FMX, which means not only is everybody now looking for light bulbs out or a potential slip and fall or reporting it all together so that we're aware, but at the end of the year, we're able to go through the data of FMX to see how many of the maintenance needs over the year were in painting or construction or new equipment, and be able to then carve out for our budget where it looks like our needs really are. So if you have small plumbing all the time and you might want to invest in a larger plumbing need, a great way to see that is through all these small workers orders. So it's just a really lovely system that gets so many more eyes into the process and aware. and a part of the solution to help identify problems and be able to manage them on very small levels. I was out today and found a board I'd like replaced, for example, but we had a system to be able to communicate that. So that one I think is a really low-hanging fruit I offer out.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Eve. I'm definitely going to look into that because I think, you know, our person who handles most of that can feel very overwhelmed. And then, you know, when people know that person's overwhelmed, they're reluctant to mention something that needs to be tended to. So I was just I wrote about this in the intro for the newsletter last week, but just to lift up encouraging folks to connect with your local emergency manager. It was such a mutually beneficial meeting to have her come visit Gilchrist and see what we have. And I think particularly in this moment, I mean, you know, she works within the sheriff's department and pulled up in this huge sheriff's department truck, and like, you know, there's a lot of tension right now politically, especially for people who are even remotely associated with law enforcement in certain places. And so for her to come here and feel welcome and to have this conversation where we found significantly overlapping interests, like, you know, just to kind of extend what Gloria said about team building, like the team building among the staff at the Institute, but also the team building in the community. We're part of a neighborhood of centers. We support each other. We've been dealing with a mold issue in one of our buildings this year. Now we've got this whole, like, you know, mycelial network of all the people who do all the special things around mold. And now we have that information to share with other people when they're facing similar issues. So just continuing to grow those networks and growing those connections has been super helpful to me, and to realize that I'm not in it alone.
Well said. And yeah, a great resource. So thank you for bringing that up. And I loved reading what you wrote earlier. So I look forward to reading many more of those newsletters as well. Prior to working in this position, I was the executive director of a Habitat for Humanity and worked in a community in Pennsylvania and worked with the national organization. And did a lot of work with the emergency side and emergency response, depending on what kinds of situations happened. And those are such knowledgeable people in some communities. So to tap into them is such a good idea, and one I'm going to take to heart, because in this role, I wonder if there are more in the communities around each of these retreat centers that I could engage with better. So I'll take that back to us as well. And with that, it is 10 of. I want to give this back to you, Erin. I want to thank everybody for thinking that talking about risk was a fun way to spend some time together, and just personally how much I enjoy sharing space with other folks in the retreating space. I think what you said, Kirsten, is really correct, that there are times when we all feel isolated. And so to have community, especially when it's something scary like a risk you may be dealing with or not sure you have the knowledge for, could be overwhelming. And have community as an opportunity to come together and get best practices and share and commiserate is really, really important, so that we are able to mitigate as much risk as possible at our retreat centers, and also be able to provide the transformational moments people have while they're on their journeys with us. So thank you so much for sharing the space for me and giving me a chance to talk about really exciting things like contracts.
Thank you so much, Eve. We just really appreciate having you here, and your guidance and suggestions, and feels like this is a conversation that we could open up to have more iterations of in the future. I just have a couple of housekeeping things before I let you go. I'm going to put my email address in the chat, so take note of that. If you would like to email me to request the slide deck, I'd be happy to send it directly to you. It will also be saved in the public RCC Google Drive, which I can also pop a link to in the chat. I can copy the link here. And in that same folder, there will also be the sample certificate of liability insurance in there as well. But if it's easier to reach out to me, feel free to do that. This will also be posted, the recording of this session will be posted up on YouTube. I usually try to get to it day of, but since I'm at Siena at the retreat, it may be a couple of days before it's up on YouTube, so keep an eye out for that. But otherwise, the links will also be in the description in the YouTube video. So if you're watching later, take a look at the description for those links so that you can take a look at all of that information. Yeah, I'm just so glad to have you all here, and we'll let you go. Yep. Enjoy the rest of your days.
Bye, everyone.
all.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.